And he is a great athlete, one of the best receivers in the NFL from a talent standpoint. Production standpoint, we haven't quite seen it for a variety of reasons. And in Cleveland last year, I'm a firm believer that every offense needs to be premised on throwing the ball to the guy who's open, and you can't force it to one player. And I feel like last year it was a constant narrative. And this is one of the reasons why Freddie Kitchens wasn't suited to be an NFL head coach. He didn't know how to deal with that issue. He got thrust into that job. That was one of the most important things for him to handle all year long, keeping that Odell Beckham Jr. urgency to get the football under wraps so it doesn't disrupt your offense, so it doesn't screw up your quarterback's process as he goes from receiver to receiver. Instead of just finding the open man, he feels like he's got to get it to OBJ or OBJ is not going to be happy. So, before we talk about where OBJ could go if the Browns are indeed thinking about trading, because we're talking about this, there was a report yesterday from WFAN that the Browns are talking to the Vikings about trading Odell Beckham Jr. there. How do they salvage it in Cleveland? How do they turn year two into something better than what it was in year one?
Well, okay, the first thing is, hey, Baker Mayfield had a down year, all right? You know, they had some pass protection issues. You talked about Freddie Kitchens being new to the job. I think that could have been approached a little bit differently as far as things they were doing to make Odell Beckham Jr. the focal point a little bit. And again, you know, he wasn't healthy. I mean, as we know, he got surgery right after the year was over. You know, and again, as much as we say, oh, Odell Beckham Jr., we're scared of him, he might be a diva, blah, 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 blah. He didn't ask for more money last year. He played through injury the whole year, and we didn't really hear about it to the end of the season. And within that, he still had 1,000 yards receiving. So, you know, I don't look at it as it went wrong. I just don't think it went to what people's expectations are. And that's where I'm Cleveland right now, and I'm just going, there's just no way. I wouldn't make that trade right now. I wouldn't. You haven't seen the best of this player. And just again, you know, Mike, I'm a fanboy here of Odell Beckham Jr., but that's because, you know, when healthy, he's as talented as I've ever seen in the history of the sport at wide receiver. Route running, quickness, you know, straight ahead explosion and speed, the ability to make people miss. I mean, there's really no weakness to his game. And like I said in the first hour, Mike, he had a lot of value to that offense because of the attention that he garnered on a week-to-week basis.
So if they've decided in Cleveland that they are going to explore their options for what they can get, John Dorsey's gone, Freddie Kitchens is gone, you've got a new regime there. The only common denominator is ownership and Paul DePodesta. But if they've decided that this just isn't going to work long-term, where do you think, if not Minnesota, where do you think potential landing spots for Odell Beckham Jr. would be?
Well, all right. So, I mean, again, I will say the Raiders, they have a multitude of picks. They have a desperate need at the position. I don't really envision that happening, but I know that John Gruden would certainly fancy a guy like Odell Beckham Jr., just like he did Antonio Brown. You know, these are special talents. But I think they have more holes to fill in their roster probably right now. That's not realistic. Now, the other two teams I'm going to go to, one, we heard in the trade conversation a lot for a wide receiver. The New England Patriots were involved in the DeAndre Hopkins conversation and the Stephon Diggs conversation. And I think if you tell Bill Belichick it's only going to take a second and a 5 and a 5th to get Odell Beckham Jr., I think they would be very real players. And I'll please raise my hand for Green Bay Packers to get in that conversation as well. You know, why? Man, Aaron Rodgers and Odell Beckham Jr., I think that's a marriage that could last a long, long time and really be successful. They fit as far as their style of plays together in a lot of ways too. So those are three teams that jump out to me, the latter two more than the Raiders.
To me, the thing that told me that Odell Beckham Jr. was not long for Cleveland was the comments he made before they played the Patriots last year. It's obvious he craves that kind of structure. He craves that kind of organization, which is stunning because he seems like the last guy who would sign on for the Patriot way, where you check your ego and your individuality at the door. But he seems to want that because he understands that's a path to winning championships and building your legacy. So I feel like he is, despite his talents, beyond his years, I feel like he's still kind of young, naive, immature, and he wants someone to say, this is how we win football games. This is how we build the right kind of program. This is how we pursue championships. That's what he clearly wants. Every outburst we've ever seen from him comes from a desire to win. So
yes.
I think he does want to play for the Patriots. Now, the Patriots without Tom Brady,
right,
that may be a different issue. And the problem is the Buccaneers don't need Odell Beckham Jr. They have a full house at receiver. So
no doubt.
The Patriots not as clear as they would have been a year ago, or if Brady had stayed. So the 49ers were a team that was pursuing him last year, and some think the Giants actually took less from the Browns than what they could have gotten from the 49ers to get OBJ out of the division. Do you think San Francisco should jump back into this?
Well, they have the assets to do it with the 13th and 31 pick in the first round. I do think there's some possibility there for that conversation. Yeah, I don't think that's totally crazy. I don't. And again, my buddy Kyle Shanahan, he's got an eye for talent. He sees the game through the wide receiver's eyes. That's why guys like Julio Jones and Andre Johnson and even Pierre Garçon with the Washington Redskins thrived with Shanahan. And we saw Deebo Samuel last year. So I think that's in the possibility. Yes. Again, a little bit it's going to be dictating how teams want to fill their roster through the draft. And, Mike, with Odell Beckham Jr., I think you make a great point. I mean, first off, I think this guy wants to be great. I know that. And anytime we see him doing a video, he's working out, he's trying to get better. That's all he does. He's obsessed with it. I think he does want an organization that meets the standard he sees. And, to your point with where, again, okay, yes, he's been a little bit of a pain in the butt here and there. I'll take my experience with Randy Moss a little bit. Randy Moss, what I learned more than anything is when he got unhappy or disgruntled, and even our conversations I had with him were more times because he felt like the organization wasn't meeting the standard. I think you never heard a peep from him in New England, one, because of the culture, but two, I think he saw and went, man, they do everything perfect. And they work all day, and they're obsessive, and they always have creative ideas, and this is unbelievable. I got nothing to be unhappy about. If I don't go out and play, I just got to blame myself. Where I think he went to other places and saw it and went like, what the hell are these people doing here? Like, this is crazy. And then he gets frustrated, and then he spouts off. And I think that could be the same for a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. as well. What are you smirking about?
That wasn't. I'm just the whole thing. Just it's amazing to me that this has become a story a week before the draft. But I'm telling you, my spider sense is tingling on this one. I feel like there's something to it. The way the report came out, I think the Vikings were doing their homework, talked to someone with the Giants, and someone from the Giants told someone from WFAN, and that's how it all got out there. And I think it's something that the Browns are exploring, and the failure of the Browns to shout from the rooftops that we are not trading Odell Beckham Jr., to me, is the best evidence that they're at least keeping their options open.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.